Curt Till It Hurts, the culture cast caught at the crossroads of curation and masturbation. I'm Ben.
And I'm Curt.
And this week, we ponder the way in which certain truths are true eternally. This week, we watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a film in which a millennial ruins a perfectly good family dinner. Yeah, I thought that you'd like that one.
I like that.
Yeah.
That was good. That's.
Yeah.
I hope you can keep up with that.
Oh hell yeah, yeah! That's my new challenge. And now, hey, let's make the announcement right off the bat. We're making a little format change.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to do it?
We're doing it weekly.
Yeah. Woo! Yes. Taking Ben and Curt Till It Hurts to a weekly production, which I'm fucking stoked for. I think the folly of this show has been trying to cram way too much into too small of an episode, and I think doubling the amount of episodes we do is going to give us a lot more time to talk about things one at a time, focus on one thing instead of having to focus on 4 3-hour movies in one block.
You know what it gives us a chance to do? This format change is so fundamentally going to change the tone of the show that we really need to do Tarantino again.
Yes.
It would be irresponsible for us not to return to Quentin Tarantino's body of work.
Such a great point. I would also like to add that with the extra 2 episodes a month, I really cannot see a reason why one of those episodes each month cannot be dedicated to Resident Evil 4.
Yes. That's been holding us back this whole time.
Yep.
We want to talk about it every week.
Literally all I think about when we record is Resident Evil 4.
I always wanted to, and hey, we're going to talk about it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is hugely influential in Resident Evil 4. We should have a segment each week, which is, how did this thing influence Resident Evil 4?
Yes.
Or how does this thing remind us of Resident Evil 4?
And I think that Resident Evil 4 is so all-encompassing of everything that has ever mattered that... there's a little bit of everything in Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, if it matters, it's in Resident Evil 4. If it's not in Resident Evil 4, it doesn't matter.
Why would we be talking about it if it had nothing to do
with
Resident Evil 4?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep. And with that format change, do we want to start the other part of the format change too?
I don't remember what the other part is.
The other part was check-ins are being moved from a weekly, from an every show thing to a once a month thing, so that we can, maybe we'll do it this week. This is partially selfish. I have nothing to check in about. I don't want to stop you from checking in about the stuff that you plan to check in.
I have some stuff, but after this, we'll do a once a month.
Yeah, once a month, so we can really stew and let the glutinous strands develop of our thoughts of these pieces of culture that we intend to tell you about. Anyway, Curtis, tell me about what you've been up to.
I've actually been very busy, which is why this was a good week for me to actually do a check-in. Quick things. I started reading Gucci Mane's autobiography. Pretty dope. That's all. Really, it's a little... I haven't finished it yet, but pretty dope. More importantly, we are into October, so I'm 4 days deep now into the 31 Days of Horror, where I try and fail to watch 31 horror films during the month of October.
It's kind of an ordeal that you put yourself through. It's a yearly failure that you set yourself up for.
And, but it's still fun. It's fun to fail. So I'm going to watch the new Chucky movie tonight, but I watched Village of the Damned, the John Carpenter remake last night.
That's a hell of a movie. It
is. You know what I noticed about it, too, is that there's really very little, like gore or murderous things in it. It's very subtle in its approach.
That one's psychological, right? That's a psychological kind of allegorical horror movie.
Yeah.
The horror of losing the children of your community, having the children have a fundamentally different perspective on the world. And because the world started moving so fast in the 20th century, you can understand why they were thinking about that.
The other kind of big-ish things, since we are now in October, we're in the fourth quarter of 2017, which means that I'm on the fast track to trying to listen to all the albums that I've been listening to for from this year to make my top 10 list, which I really make a bigger deal out of than I need to. It's really just for me, but I'm just I got 100 albums on this list. I need to get to work. But last week I actually started a cool project that I'll never be able to share with anybody, but I wanted to talk about it, and I don't want to take too much time, but I'm pretty stoked about it.
Good.
Are you a fan of Black Sabbath at all? So I started mixing together a bit of a Black Sabbath bootleg on my own time because of there are 2 albums. Black Sabbath has an album called Live Evil, which is a live show, and Ozzy Osbourne, who was the singer for Black Sabbath before Dio, has a live album of all Black Sabbath songs. And coincidentally, they came out within a month of each other in 1982, and it caused it kind of made both albums flop because people were kind of, you bought one or the other. So I started I have all this like podcast and recording equipment that I pretty much just use for this show. So I started recording those projects through my mixer and then putting them into the program I use to edit our podcast. And I started like mixing them together so they play as like I cut the songs all up and like I'm mixing them to flow into one concert that has like the same. I tried to organize the songs in ways that like make sense, like with the fluidity of a performance, and I have it cutting back and forth from like an Ozzy Sabbath song to a Dio Sabbath song, and I'll never be able to share it with anybody because the Ozzy one has actually been removed from Ozzy's US discography because it's just Black Sabbath songs. Yeah. So that's just for me, but I've been working on that for hours every night.
That's
for
awesome.
The past like week, and I'm like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. I don't even like these songs anymore. I've listened to it 70 fucking times today.
All this is doing is ruining something I used to like.
I'll never be able to listen to either of these albums again.
Happy Halloween, this everybody.
Rules, yeah. But that's about it for me. Just
that's rad.
My little pet projects and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh man.
So, do you have anything? Or are you you're gonna hold off?
We went to the fair. That's fun. Cool. We went to the Cumberland Fair.
Fairs.
I love the fair, dude. The fair is like this little slice of life that you don't get any other day of the year. Yeah. It's like what other time do you go to a place and there's just food everywhere, all around you, and you just get to watch all different types of people because everyone goes to the fair.
I think of every town has those like small town traditions that in the 21st century you kind of have to ask yourself, why do we still do this? Parades. Why do we watch all the fire trucks in our town line up and just go down the street? Fucking fireworks. We have cooler shit to look at than fireworks nowadays.
We don't. Nope, that's an opinion. Nope. Fucking citation needed on that
Fake
one,
news.
Curtis.
Fake news.
Fake news. Fireworks are the coolest thing to look at today and forever.
But I think, in my opinion, the fair is really the only thing that still holds up. Like, it's still just as cool as it always used to be. There's always that, like, there's the smell of the food, the delicious food. There's that, like, there's always that, like, sense of, like, something isn't quite right. There's always that, like, this could take a dark turn. That, like, at every small town fair, you're like, this might get bad.
You just stand there watching the fucking zipper go around and around, and you keep expecting. It's like, oh, that's the place someone's going to come flying out at some point.
Hopefully I catch it this year. Because it definitely happens every year.
It happens every single year, and it's good luck if you see it.
Not for the kid in the zipper
not for
cart.
them. Very, very bad luck
Very
for them.
unfortunate for them and their loved ones.
Yeah.
That's why you need to be 4 feet tall to ride on it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, should we just get right into it
Check-ins
today?
out of the way. Fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
So, originally, when we announced Texorcism month...
Texorcism, yes. Oh, good. Thank you, Casey, for that one.
Yeah, that was great. I kind of thought it was strange because I was like, oh, these movies really don't have that much in common, or they don't have that much, to do with each other. They're kind of weird films to, put next to each other. But then I happened to see that Wikipedia only has 3 horror movies like lumped together, and they're like, people generally consider these the greatest horror movies of all time. And both The Exorcism and Texas Chainsaw Massacre are in that, they're 2 of the 3. And then as I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I'd never seen before, I was like, there's actually a lot of comparisons that you can make, with either in ways that they're similar or very different from The Exorcist. So it was really cool to view it from that, and I feel even better about Texorcism now.
Texorcism, and I think there's another comparison to make, which is that they're both movies where the original movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Exorcist, are both excellent. Mm-hmm. And then they became franchises. Because for a while, every horror movie became a franchise. Yeah. Right? And
good stuff.
From what I understand, none of the future movies in these franchises hold up. And based on Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, that's true. That fucking
right
movie.
Right now, that is 100% confirmed.
Right now, that is, that's as good as settled law. That's
It's going to be hard to prove that one wrong at this point.
Yeah. But hey, let's talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I had never seen it either. We actually watched it together for the first time, both of us.
Yep.
And I think that I think we had similar expectations going in, and I think we had similar reactions coming out. Going in, I think we were both like, all right, we've heard a lot about this movie. How's it going to hold up? And going out, we were like, holy shit.
I don't really know what I just watched, and I don't know if I liked it.
That was fucking awesome.
Ben was instantly on board.
I was instantly on board.
I had to go home and process.
Yeah, I was on board from like the opening shot. From the opening moments of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I kind of understood what type of movie it was, and I was so on board. Yeah.
I think so. Should we talk about plot before we?
Well, what is there? Well, here's how let's get into it this way. The way this movie is sold, I think, is very interesting. The way it's billed, the way it communicates itself to you before you even start watching it, which is the way I've always seen it described is like it's like a voyage into hell.
Yeah,
and I think that's true. I don't think this movie has much of a plot. The plot that it has is pretty bare bones.
Yes,
it feels like a documentary. Right, it feels sort of like a documentary.
Well, it was, and I believe it was pretty much pitched as a real event. Like on the, I saw we just watched the documentary that you showed me, and on the back of the case, it even says that this is based on, and when really it was kind of like hobbled together from Ed Gein.
It was like vaguely inspired by Ed Gein. Like
but they pitch it as like a guy with a chainsaw killed a lot of people in Texas. Like
like this shit happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that sets you up already, even knowing that it's not a real events. Mm-hmm. The way you watch it changes.
Yeah.
And it's clear. It seems at least that the way it was filmed was meant to capitalize on that idea. It's like cinema verite. It's like Dogma 95 in the 70s. It's all very down to earth. It feels real in a way that even like Kevin Smith movies that are that really feel like just idiots talking to each other at some level.
I had just watched James Rolfe's Monster Madness like mini review of this movie, and I think the biggest thing that I took away from it that he said was that the scariest thing about this movie isn't that it happened, but that it could happen. And I think that is really interesting because where you have so many horror movies and franchises based off of supernatural or even realistic things that become supernatural, like slashers, this is just a very gritty and down-to-earth, documentary feeling film of just like, holy fuck, like, there's some shit out in Texas.
Yeah, there's some shit going on in Texas. Whatever they got going on out there is on some other shit. And, yeah... What are some of your favorite parts of this movie? What do you like about this movie? Do you like this movie?
I really liked this movie, and I think the things that I like about it are things that I kind of found out afterward. When I watched it, I liked it, and I thought it was great, but it kind of, you feel kind of empty and hollow after you watch it. It's kind of like that's how I felt, and I just kind of was like, what do I do from here? And that was... Movies don't generally have that effect on me, especially when you watch as many movies as I do. They can't all have a lasting effect on you. But I think the thing that I found out about this... I had said to you, before I knew any better, I said, I think they had the title of this movie before they had it written. And then you had said that they actually didn't, and that it had a preview. Was the previous?
It was called
name?
Head Cheese.
Head Cheese.
Yeah,
was
and then
the original
there was another
name.
one, but they landed on Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And I think that the things they do to give it that real effect are really what sell the movie for me. There's a lot of horrific obviously it's about a chainsaw massacre cannibal family, but some of the techniques used in making the film really add to the authenticity of it, and that is definitely more of the behind the scenes stuff is what I like about it. It's not a lot of like pointing to a particular part and being like, this part was so cool. Mm-hmm. It's more like what they did making this film provided an overall feeling of discomfort and oppression and just horror.
What kinds of things, what kinds of behind the scene details are you thinking of when you say that?
So I want to give full credit where it's due. I had just started. I didn't realize they had done an episode about it, but the Psychotronic Film Society had recently done an episode about this show right after Tobe Hooper passed away a month or so ago.
Director of the film, Tobe Hooper.
And so a lot of my information and knowledge came from them. So, check them out if you want a really good analytical look at it. But I found out that all of the set inside the house, those were real animal parts. Though they had a very low budget.
They went out to the fucking desert, right?
Yeah, a guy named Bob Burns did all the production design, and it was all real animal parts and, real gross stuff. The house itself got up to temperatures of 115 degrees, and they recorded from 12 to 16 hours a day for, weeks straight. It got to the point where that stuff smelled. Those are real animal parts that smelled fucking awful.
Yeah.
And the actors, because this movie takes place over the course of like one horrific night, those actors had to wear the same clothes over and over and over again. And apparently Gunnar Hansen said that his pants could stand up on their own. And he, from being so, stiff with sweat and filth. And he actually wasn't allowed to stand in the catering line anymore when they were filming because his clothes smelled so bad. They would have to have somebody go and bring him food, and he could eat by himself because he had the grossest outfit on.
His mask also, I heard, was just wretched by the end of the time they were filming.
I actually also learned from that show. I don't know why people... I feel bad that people are listening to this show, and I'm just like, man, this other show is fucking
We should just be a podcast that talks about other podcasts. So that's where the real money's going to be.
There was no Tom Savini in this film. He did the effects in the second film. Very famous special effects horror guy.
Literally the only good part of the second movie.
Foreshadowing. I don't know if that's foreshadowing. That's pretty blunt. They didn't have a real special effects guy. They had an actual plastic surgeon help them design that mask. And Gunnar Hansen had to leave it on all day because they were so afraid that it would fall apart, that he wasn't really allowed to take it off.
If he kept handling it, that it was a pretty delicate... Oh, that's interesting.
So things like that, and I think the only other real thing is, there are so many shots in the movie that are staring at the sun, or you can see heat waves, or they'll use shots when the main female lead is walking up to the house. The camera is low and looking up, so this giant house dominates over her. There's so many just oppressive camera angles and shots that it feels nauseating and horrific to watch the film.
Yeah, I thought a little bit about where that feeling of oppression and that feeling of nausea comes from, because I think that's very core to what the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is. It's an incredibly intense experience, and I think the reason why that is because it's like the movie knows before the characters what is going to happen to them. And there are a few shots that I'm thinking of that make me feel that way. It's mostly the ones that come to mind have to do with Peg, the woman who dies first. Where there's that shot of her walking up to the house, and she's just walking towards the house, but the way the camera frames that shot, it's like the house is growing up over her. So it's like the movie, she's kind of unaware of what's about to happen. She's probably getting a little nervous at that point, but she doesn't know. We know, the audience knows, and the movie knows as well. And the part of the reason why we know is because the movie is letting us know. And the other shot that I think of is that great shot where Leatherface has her, right? Has Peg, and there's that hook.
Yeah.
and the camera is right behind the hook, and the hook is taking up like a good 40% of the frame, and in the background, sort of as an afterthought, you see Leatherface carrying her in. And it's like, well, shit, okay, the fucking movie knows, and the movie is telling us what's about to happen with this hook. And it's like a worse movie would cut back and forth between those two things. Yeah. But the idea to put both of them in the frame at the same time and to arrange the composition in that specific way to give you that specific feeling is pretty fucking masterful. Like, the direction in this movie is really incredible, and it makes you wonder, because Tobe Hooper directed the second one too, right?
yeah, it was sucks. It was very much involved with the same people as the first one.
Yeah.
I think one other thing that I thought was that I've thought a lot about since we watched the film was that one of the very first thing, I think it was the very first thing that happens in the film, is the main characters are riding in their VW bus, and they pull over, and what is the name of the guy in the wheelchair? Franklin.
You should remember. It's your fucking dog's name.
They pull over, and they let they have Franklin come out, and so he can go to the bathroom in a coffee can. Mm-hmm. And something shifts him, like I think a big truck goes by and rattles the ground, and he loses control of his wheelchair and rolls down this hill and eats shit at the bottom of it. And then they're like, holy fuck, and they bring him back up, and they never really address it again. And when we watched it, I was like, I don't know why that was in there. Mm-hmm. But like, thinking about it, I haven't watched it again, but thinking back, I think now, like, what a great way to allude to what's going to happen to you. You are going to be helpless and out of control on a crazy ride that nobody would want to be on.
Yeah.
And I think that really sets up, kind of what happens from then on out.
Well, what's that theory that, like, well, not just a movie, but a movie or any type of media kind of lets you know, a good one at least, lets you know what kind of thing it is in the first 10 to 15 minutes. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even though the chainsaw, Leatherface, none of the famous Texas Chainsaw Massacre stuff shows up in the first 15 minutes, it communicates to you very effectively what type of movie you're about to watch. Through, like, and when Franklin is falling down the hill, it holds on him for so long. Like, you just watch him falling. It's not like one brief shot of him falling down this hill. It feels like it lasts a long time.
It's very, similar to, like, when you see something bad happening in real life that happens in a split second, but you have that it feels like it takes forever because you have that time to say, what's going on? Oh my God, this is happening. Yeah. Oh my God, no one's going to do anything. Oh my God, that just happened. Mm-hmm. And I think that it really communicates that well by holding that shot on him. Mm. You really, I mean, obviously you would never want to see, anybody really get hurt, let alone a person in a wheelchair.
Yeah. Yeah. I dropped a cup while I was washing dishes the other day, and I got a very similar feeling. It was like, oh God, this is happening.
Yeah. Can I save it?
Can I? Is it gonna? And you just kind of watch it go down and eat shit, and then you feel bad.
So, okay. How do we best approach the rest of this film?
Because I feel like we're in it. I feel like we're in it. What are you thinking about? Like, what's on your mind right now about this movie?
I think that one of the things about it is that you don't get much character development in it. You get, I would say probably Franklin gets the most, like, development because
he has, like, a monologue at one point. Yeah, Franklin, it's gonna be great. Come on this trip, Franklin. It's gonna be so much fun, Franklin. When they're all, like, in the house and you can just hear them having fun, and
that was
Franklin is, like, struggling to go through the house,
trying to ride around on fucking tall grass in a wheelchair.
Yep.
It's really strange in that because I feel so bad for him in that movie when you kind of think, like, I just kept asking myself, like, why is Franklin here? Mm-hmm. It sounds like he wasn't sure about coming, and they convinced him to come by telling him
his sister
it would be
fun.
To come, and then he's not having fun, and they're being, like, mean to him. Like, they're leaving him behind everywhere, and they're, kind of not making fun of him, but giving him a hard time about the hitchhiker they pick up, and because he's still scared of reasonably still scared of that guy.
Totally reasonable. Ends up being actually totally right about that. They should have been more scared.
So I think one of the other... I just don't know how to talk about... I don't know what to talk about before the horror of the...
Did you find... what did you find funny about this movie? Because I found a lot of it kind of weirdly funny.
There were... I guess I don't know.
When the dad is... I don't know if he's the dad or is he...
I think he's the dad.
I think he's the dad, but in the second one, don't they call him a brother? I don't know. I'm going to call him the dad.
The first one is canon. Everything else is just an interpretation of the
it's
first
just
one.
exegesis. Let's call him the dad.
Okay.
When the dad has the woman in the bag in the pickup truck and he's just poking her. He's just poking her with the stick.
Yeah.
And laughing at her, and it's just like, it is truly hellish. Like, that is I don't know if you've ever looked deeply into like antiquated depictions of hell. Like I have.
I definitely have.
I think he's the I believe he's Dutch. The old painter Hieronymus Bosch. I forget what time period he worked in, but it was back when people like really took hell fucking super seriously. Like most people took hell super seriously. This guy did a lot of depictions. He did a triptychs, I think. There's one particular triptych called The Garden of Earthly Delights, I believe. And in his depictions of hell, it was always just asshole demons just poking people and being dicks. Like no grand unified torment. It was all just individual shitheads just being assholes to people. Yeah. Like, hey, we got you down here. We're gonna do this.
I think there was a lot of... I think a lot of the dialogue between the main characters ended up being pretty funny, because I think that they were... even the reason that they're like out and about is kind of not really explicitly...
Well, like they want to visit the grave to make sure that their grandpa is his corpse has not been exhumed.
Yep.
But they're also just like hippies on a road trip.
Yeah.
Right?
Which apparently before us millennials were born. Are we millennials? I don't actually know.
We are textbook millennials.
Okay.
Curtis, we have a podcast.
That's okay. Touche.
Before millennials,
apparently people just went places without purpose. Like they just let's just all get in one vehicle and go places.
Mm-hmm. None of them had stable jobs. They were all hippies. They all like fucking did whatever. They picked up cash wherever they could. They like crashed on each other's couches.
Yeah, and so I liked a lot of the dialogue. I think Franklin had his funny moments of being pissed off that he went with them. I think there was some when they're reading the what is it? The horoscopes?
Yeah, the horoscopes. Yeah, the astrology.
She said, one of the guys says, "Do you fucking buy this?" And the guy's like, "I don't know, man." Like they just, I liked a lot of that. Like we really have no purpose. Like just purposeless having a okay. We're just kind of
driving.
Yeah,
yeah.
Hanging out. I think a lot of that worked, but really, I think I didn't have much like comic relief in that movie. I felt pretty oppressed the whole time.
What about so late in the movie when Leatherface is chasing? I feel bad just calling her the girl over and over again.
Is
but
it Sally?
That's essentially what she amounts to, right? She's the last girl. She's the first last girl, or one of the first last girls in
Sally?
movie history. I believe it is Sally, actually. Now that you mention it, yeah, Sally and Franklin.
Yeah.
Sally's running away from Leatherface on the road, and like the truck driver stops, and then the truck driver gets out, and then Leatherface just chases him around the truck a couple times.
It becomes a Benny Hill.
Yeah, it becomes like, they're literally just running away from this guy, and it, like so many things in this movie, it's not a particularly long movie. It's like what, an hour 25 or something.
Yeah,
and it doesn't feel very long, but individual moments feel like they go on for too long. Like, and it happens regularly enough that it feels like it's not an accident.
Yeah.
It feels intentional. Like it adds a little bit of maybe a feeling of authenticity to it, but it's also, I just find it really funny when people edit things in a way that makes them just go on a little too long and then way too long.
With you saying that, I do remember that we both laughed when Sally trips in the kitchen, and there's like that 35-minute glory, shot of every horrific thing. Just like zooming in so far, and then it like zooms into a chicken's eyeball, and it's just like the horror.
Like, look at my sculptures.
And to be fair, that's pretty cool to look at.
That
guy put a lot of work into that.
And that's the thing. It never feels like it goes on too long because each individual shot is always a good composition. Like
I could probably watch it again.
Yeah,
Look at other things that I hadn't noticed.
Right, you appreciate things. Every shot is so busy. The set design is really amazing inside the house. Even before that, like even the set design inside the van is really cool too. For that really claustrophobic scene when what's his name, the wine stain face stain guy is in there.
He has a name too.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know any of these people's names.
It's just the hitchhiker. That's what it is. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And when he's in there and like that whole scene with him, he takes a picture of Franklin and he's like, "It's a good picture.
Yeah,
you buy it for $2."
Yep. Yeah. So that is a good time to bring up the family, because I think that it's important to talk about the family, because I think one of the greatest parts of this movie is that because not only is it, the climactic scariest part of the film, there's a lot going on with each of those characters individually that adds to how great the whole film is.
So who is there? There's the hitchhiker, there's Leatherface, there's the dad, and there's Grandpa. Yeah. Grandpa fucked you up.
So we'll talk about Grandpa first, because there's really not much to say about him.
I think there's a lot to say about Grandpa.
So
Curtis, stop trying to avoid the subject of Grandpa.
We're going to talk Grandpa for the next
Grandpa
half hour.
talk.
So As Sally is trying to escape Leatherface, she runs up the stairs into the house.
She jumps out of 2 windows in this movie. Yeah. I believe this is before she has jumped out her first, but that's something Roger Ebert brings up in his review. He gave it like 2.5 stars.
Yeah.
At the time, I believe. But he seemed confounded by it in a way that I bet made it kind of grow on him as he grew older and saw how it kind of spawned this whole movement of film.
Yeah.
As Texas Chainsaw Massacre grew more and more influential, people liked it more and more. But yeah, that's something that he mentions in his review. He's like, the main character Sally jumps out of no fewer than 2 windows over the course of this film.
So she runs upstairs and kind of opens this door and sees like the classic hanging light bulb with no shade, so it's just like bright yellow 70s light bulb illuminating a very dead and rotten corpse in one chair, and what I assumed was another very rotten and dead corpse in the other chair. And after she gets kidnapped, they have her tied up at the table for the big dinner scene. Yeah. And the dad is saying, go get Grandpa. So the hitchhiker and Leatherface carry down this body in a wooden chair. Mm-hmm. At which point we realize he's totally not dead. He's just also not very alive.
Yeah. The moment that I realized it was when they cut Sally's finger.
Yeah.
And they put it in Grandpa's mouth and you can see him suckling at it.
And he's just super into it. Very, very tenderly, like a baby. Like a baby, just really going for the blood. And that really kind of...
That fucked you up.
That stuck with me. I'm different now.
That changed you. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I thought it was cool.
That's really the only other thing that he really brings to that film is he has this reputation for being the best cowhead smasher.
He's a one-hitter. He's a one-hitter, you know, one-hit kill.
Was like 70 in a minute, and the only reason it wasn't more is because they couldn't get the dead cows out of the way fast enough.
Yeah.
So they try to get him to bash in Sally's head.
Come on, Grandpa.
With a bucket a bucket with a ball-peen hammer.
Yeah.
And the futility, he literally is barely alive and has no strength. He can't even hold the hammer. I think he does get one, maybe not even, he doesn't even a swing, but he does manage to drop it on her head.
He gets one disturbingly heavy blow on Sally's head.
And that's really all he contributes, just being horrifically horrifying.
Well, and he's just there the whole time at dinner. Yeah. He's just there. That dinner sequence is one of the greatest sequences in the history of cinema. Not just horror cinema. just cinema in general, in my opinion. It is a perfect sequence. It's the climactic moment for everything that's come before. Mm-hmm. And it's just like all the horror that you've experienced, the hellishness is all concentrated into this one scene where all the demons are there together. Even that scary guy that you didn't know was alive is there.
That it really, and it shows, I mean, obviously, literally, but it really, the horrifying is that it just connects all of it. Like, that scary hitchhiker, obviously he's part of this. Yeah. That nice guy that you thought was... That guy, the dad literally tells them, don't fucking go poking around people's houses. They don't like it. You're not going to like what you find.
Yeah, he just works at a gas station.
He literally tells them not to go, looking around, and then... kind of flips his tune when they don't take his advice.
Yeah.
And, and then all the very horrifying things that Leatherface does, he's also a part of that. Wearing makeup now, for some reason.
Yeah, Leatherface has, 3 different outfits, right? He has, 3 masks.
His butcher face mask when you first meet him, and then...
when he's collecting the meat for dinner.
Yeah, and then he puts on his best suit for dinner and a mask with makeup on it.
So, that's another funny moment. And then another funny Leatherface moment is when Sally has gone into the house. He is chasing her. He chainsaws the shit out of the door and then opens the door. He's literally standing there driving his chainsaw through the door over and over and over again. And then he just pushes it open like normal.
Yeah.
Or he kicks it, but he doesn't kick through the door. He opens the door. And then later on when Dad comes back, he's like, you left your brother at home alone again. Look what he did to the door.
Look what he did to the door. That was a really effective, callback joke to that.
Because you notice it. It's so funny in the moment when he just slams the door open after chainsawing the shit out of it.
So, one of the things that I thought was really interesting, aside from how each character was scary in their own way, was that there was a very interesting family dynamic.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too.
And that's what I really find interesting. You have the dad who is the most normal, that keeps he can keep a front. Yeah. He can he can go out to
function in
his store and be there for people that need gas or
not really. He's out of gas.
Cooked humans.
We don't got no gas.
Which that was also, they never directly say in the movie that his barbecue is human, but when she is there sitting and he goes outside to get the rope to tie her up, they do a really weird, she looks into his big smoker and there are just unidentifiable slabs of meat hanging, and it kind of slowly zooms in and it alludes to the fact that to me I was like, I think they're showing that that's human meat.
Well, yeah, by that point you figured out that there's a cannibalism situation going on in rural Texas here. And at that point, you don't know that the dad is involved. You don't know that the convenience store guy is involved. But you know that Leatherface is collecting people for something.
Yeah.
He's putting them in a freezer and hanging them up on hooks and shit. And he looks like a butcher. He doesn't look like a murderer. He looks like he's collecting them to cook them.
I also, this might be a better thing to get into later. But what I like about that was he is kind of the front of this family, but he is also the most squeamish, and he doesn't like to personally kill any of the people that they are, hacking up and eating and cooking. And then you have the hitchhiker, who I don't think he's supposed to leave. I think he just does, and his dad kind of yells at him, stop going to the the meat processing plant, and they're like, they didn't see me, but easily should not be out in public. There's something very wrong with that person.
He's
out the gate.
He's the nightmare hitchhiker. He's the worst possible hitchhiker experience you can have.
And then Leatherface is obviously the butcher of the family, but kind of he likes to walk around with people's skin on his face, so he's even the most childish of them.
Leatherface is played very directly as a person with a disability.
Yeah.
Which should be more offensive than it ends up being. It actually ends up being kind of... Because everything about this family is fucked up.
Yeah.
So, like, in the context of this fucked up, horrible family, the depiction of a person with a disability is actually pretty good. Like, it's pretty consistent. I mean, the fact across the board.
The hitchhiker is not supposed to leave Leatherface alone. Like, that, he's the babysitter.
That's a very human moment. Yeah. You know, it's like, well, this family has the way they do things. They have a kid with a disability, but as any family with a disability does, you find ways to make it work. Yep. You know, you incorporate them into the family dinner. Turns out he loves chainsawing people apart. He's really good at it. He has a function within the family. He is serving a purpose within the family. He's not just the institutionalized vision of a person with a disability literally sitting in a corner all day. Yep. Leatherface is able to contribute something to society.
to their little four-person society.
Yeah, their little society, such as it is. He has a purpose within it, and that's a really kind of beautiful thing that is totally lost in the second movie. The second movie fucking sucks. Second movie's terrible. I hate it. And anyway, what were you talking about?
I just think that it was very... What adds to how amazing this film is that you have this horrifying family that have this one horrifying thing in common, but all four of these people are very scary in different ways. Individually scary, but they all have a dynamic that makes it all still hold together. Like, even for no purpose, essentially. Like, they don't need to actually function as a family for it to be scary, but they do. And I think, it adds to it when it didn't necessarily need to be there to be scary. It could have been scary enough, is what I'm saying. But the fact that it's like a juxtaposition of real humanity with the horrifying cannibalism and murder that really... It accentuates both sides of it.
When you were young, did you ever go over to someone else's house for dinner and like get kind of fucking weirded out by how they did everything differently from you?
Or different things they ate.
Or like different ways that they interacted with each other from how you were used to.
Yeah.
I think that's a common experience for everyone, and I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre really nails that feeling of like, I am in this chair, I can't move, shit is crazy all around me. Yep. This is totally different from what I'm used to, and I'm really freaking out right now. Because when you're a kid, you don't know how to process any of that. It's like your family is all that you know. Your family has taught you what the whole world is like, and you assume that everyone is pretty much like you. But then you get out in the world, and you just go over to a friend's house from school for dinner, and suddenly your whole world gets fucking flipped upside down. And it's really interesting that... we keep saying interesting. We gotta cut that out.
Yeah.
I think it's really poignant that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even among the like hellish imagery and the quite like disturbing moments, is able to capture something that is so core to what it feels like to be a kid.
To emphasize that point, I won't go off too much on a tangent about this, but I remember vividly the first meal that I ate at a friend's house, because it was so different from my own. And it wasn't even that different, but when you're so used to one thing as a kid. I was in first grade, and it was the first friend that I had that like wasn't like my cousin or like daycare. He was like my first friend from school, and I went to his house for dinner, and my family was always like, you eat like bloody steak and mashed potatoes and like a canned vegetable. That was a fucking Manchester meal to a T. And I went to his house, and it was similar but different, where it was like they made mashed carrots and potatoes. So I was like, why are my potatoes bright orange? Like, and then they had like, I swear it was like, I think it was cooked spinach with Italian dressing. Like, I think the kids liked it more if it had like the dressing on it. And then they had like weird like cooked shaved steak with Italian dressing on. They fucking loved Italian dressing.
Italian dressing. If you would like to put any Italian dressing on your potatoes, please feel free.
Where it was so similar to what I ate, but so different. It was like a weird fun house, like, what the fuck is going on?
It's like, the uncanny. Like, the source of all horror is the uncanny. I like horror a lot, and I think a lot about why things are scary. And when you read the literature about horror fiction, the idea of the uncanny keeps coming back. It's not things that are completely different from how you do things. It's things that are kind of like how you do things, but just different enough in very specific ways. However, that dinner does sound fucked up. And
Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to say that's not just you being a kid. That's a fucked up weird thing, and those people should feel bad. You see, my story might shine more light on who I was as a child than anything else, because I went over to a friend's house one time, and like I moved around a lot, so there would always be a period of time before I would go over to people's houses, right? Or it's like, I don't know anybody, I don't know who these people are. Suddenly I'm in 5th grade and someone's like, hey, do you want to come over to my house for dinner? I think it was because most of their friends were like kind of fuck ups in 5th grade, and I was like kind of a quiet, nice kid, and he was like, I want to show my parents that I know some of these things.
I know a normal kid.
And I go over to his house.
Friends with some nerd.
I'm friends with some dorko. He's always carrying around these thick books. It's called It. I don't know what it's about. I went over to his house. We played Driver on the PlayStation.
Naturally. For
a couple minutes, like a couple hours. And then I went out to the living room, and both his parents were there. And his mom asked me, do you like pork chops? I didn't know what to say, so I said no. And so she was like, well, what do you like? And I was like, I don't know, because I didn't want to
I'd like to be left alone.
I would like to not eat dinner at this house because
I was playing Driver.
I was playing Driver. I would very much like to go home now. It was the prospect of even eating dinner at a different house from my own was enough to paralyze me. Yeah. And I got that same feeling while I was watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah. And it was very nice. It helped me process some of that weird trauma from my childhood of being asked if I liked pork chops. What the fuck?
You poor kid.
What was wrong with me?
So I guess we kind of have to talk specifically about the dinner scene.
I think it's very important.
Because
that's where the family dynamic comes in. Before that, you only see the characters individually, I think. Yep. But it's at dinner. It's when everyone returns home at night. It's like, Leatherface has been home preparing our meat all day. The fucking hitchhiker has been out doing whatever he does. He's kind of a loser. We don't really... Yeah. We want him to get his act together. And then Dad comes home. Come bring down Grandpa. It's time for our family meal.
So the thing that I guess is strange to me in this movie is that I don't understand, I don't think, why the dinner scene exists. When the first hitchhiker, not the hitchhiker character, but the first hippie road trip kid walks into the house, it's almost funny how quickly Leatherface slides that metal door open, smacks him with a meat tenderizer, and then he thrashes all over the floor.
I'm trying to remember the sequence of shots because it's beautiful. He walks into the doorway by the staircase, and then you see a shot of Leatherface approaching him. Boom! Bops him on the head with a hammer. He's down. He's down for the count. Leatherface then, it's a wide shot back to the original shot of when he walked into the house, and Leatherface slams shut like a metal door that you did not even know was there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and that's such a good shot. Like his body language when he slams that thing shut is perfect.
I actually found out another fun fact about that moment. Gunner, who plays Leatherface, is a huge guy. He's a big man. And it's especially effective when he's carrying that little tiny hippie girl. And you're like, that guy's fucking huge.
Yeah.
So when he conked that hippie with that thing, he actually, the guy's eyes, capillaries in his eyes started bleeding because he hit him in the head so hard with it. That was a pretty brutal shoot from what I've been gathering.
It seems like nobody left that shoot unharmed.
Nobody had a good time.
Yeah. Everyone kind of hated Tobe Hooper by the end.
So a lot of the death in that movie seems to be blunt and, quick.
There's not a lot of build-up.
Franklin gets a chainsaw right through his chest, and he's just dead. There's no question. So it was strange to me why they would choose one of them to capture, torment, tie up, and then slowly try to kill her with a hammer.
I think it was just because, like, Sally... Well, like, towards the end of the movie, one of the very last shots you see of Sally, she spends the entire movie screaming.
Yeah.
Right? And running away. From the moment she sees Leatherface, she's essentially running away, except for a brief period in the convenience store in the gas station with Dad, at which point she stops briefly before she starts again.
Yep.
Running and screaming.
She gets a good few minutes in a sack getting poked with a fucking stick.
Yeah. I think that textually speaking, what happens is Dad just captures her and he's like, "Oh, bring her home for dinner. We'll feed her. It'll be a nice meal. And then Grandpa can kill her or whatever." But I think that in the not the allegory of the movie, but the subtext of the movie is that she's transformed by her experience. When she's in the back of that pickup truck, she's different from how she was before. She is more like the family. They have rubbed off on her. Not that she would then start eating people, but they have disturbed her fundamentally. Her crying and screaming almost sounds like laughter. I don't know if
hysterical.
It is actually. It becomes hysterical laughter.
I think when you watch it with subtitles, it says hysterical laughter.
Uh-huh. And Leatherface is just spinning around with his chainsaw,
which is such a cool
dancing.
Like, he was just like, well, she got away. Like, I'll just dance with my chainsaw like I do.
Yeah.
And I think in the second one they add the fact that she had gone crazy and couldn't really tell anybody.
Second one fucking sucks.
Yeah, we shouldn't count that.
We should. It's not canon. It sucks.
So that in a nutshell is the first film. Not a lot happens, and it's not a very long film.
It's a lot of running and screaming.
Yeah, and to added effect to that was very low budget film, and what adds to the authenticity of it is one more example, like you were saying, how Sally spends most of the film screaming and running. There's not a special thicket that they made for her to run through. Like she's really running through just bush in Texas. And so she's really getting scraped up and banged on by branches. She's really getting her hair tangled and ripped out. It's a very brutal film of just very real, very real emotion and fear. I had pointed out when we were watching it that some of the scariest things in the movie were that usually films now rely on jump scares, and like you turn around and boom, there it is. You didn't expect it to be there.
The music is the most important part of most modern horror movies. You can really just listen to the soundtrack and know when you're supposed to be scared.
Here, there's no mystery. There's a woman running through the woods, and you can hear a chainsaw in the distance.
You can usually see him in the frame. It's
getting louder. Yeah. Like he's coming.
Yeah,
and it's just very. That alone is just a very. That on top of the fact that I had mentioned, like, I'm very familiar with what a chainsaw smells like and sounds like in person, which really adds to the, like, I've never been stabbed or cut very badly. I've cut my own hands at work, but...
when you're bored.
Yeah. So I don't know what it feels like to be slashed. I don't know what it feels like to be...
Where the fuck is this going?
Like, I don't know what it feels like to be cut open, but I know what it feels like. I know what it sounds like and smells like to be in the presence of a chainsaw.
Oh, yeah.
And that is very scary to think about, to have worked with chainsaws and be like, look at it eat through a tree. And then what would happen if it,
Well, I think the cool thing about the chainsaw from a cinematic perspective is that it is a tool of death that provides its own soundtrack.
Yeah.
And that is pretty much the soundtrack for feels like a good 30 minutes of the movie, is just Sally screaming and a chainsaw roaring.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not really scared right now. I'm not even really worried about Sally. I know it's a movie. It feels... I don't know. It was hard for me during the running periods to be there with her, but it still gives you this oppressive feeling of like, what am I watching?
Yeah.
Like, this is fucked up.
Yeah. It is a constant reminder. I think it's strange, not strange, but interesting how the chainsaw kind of becomes, as far as like you know, when you look at like zombie movies or whatever, kind of the shotgun has become the zombie weapon.
Do you think that's just Evil Dead, or do you think there are other things
I think
from it?
Evil Dead for sure, and then I think basically any Resident Evil game, especially mostly the older ones, you are in very tight quarters with a pistol with not enough ammo. And it is, for me, when I was a kid, it was always a constant state of fear until I found a shotgun. And then it was like, no matter what happens now, I can pretty much, if worst comes to worst, I have a shotgun. I'm going to save it for the boss battle, but I think that for a lot of grindhouse horror type thing, the chainsaw has become a staple for you know, the weapon or horror that gets used. So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Are we ready?
Yeah, I think we're ready.
Okay.
This movie is an insult.
I need to frame the second movie. So, with our first movie, we have a group of hippies that pick up a hitchhiker, and they get scared. They're scared shitless by it. They drop him off. They're low on gas, and they through their looking for gas, find a horrifying family of murderous cannibals that are trying to kill and eat them.
That's the whole plot.
That's the movie.
Yeah.
And the second one, the father of this family becomes famous for his chili, which secret ingredient is human flesh.
Yeah.
And using this money that he makes from being famous for his chili, creates a subterranean carnival funhouse.
An amusement park.
Also,
right?
Techno Labyrinth amusement park.
Yeah, like a theme park. It's weird.
An underground theme park.
What is it? It's called like Battle Land, right?
I don't remember. I honestly, if I were a good podcast host, I would have watched the second one again because I was so just like, what the fuck is this? That I kind of had like started tuning out because it's just so fucking bad.
It's like, it's more of a comedy, but it's not a good comedy. Like, I kind of get what they were going for. I get what they were going for with the Battle Land. Like, there are these constant references to, like, remember the Alamo and remember Texas is a very battle-focused place, so it's like they're trying to make some kind of commentary on the way in which the Chainsaw family, the Sawyers, as they're called, as they're named in the second movie, the way in which the Sawyers are representative of this undercurrent of violence that's present in Texas that like suffuses Texas, a love of violence and a feeling that violence is a dignified and elevated thing. It doesn't really communicate that very effectively. It's like you can see kind of what they are going for, but I don't think it's very good.
With the hippies in the first film, they don't do a great job at developing them. I never really felt attached to them. Like, I don't want to see anybody get murdered with a chainsaw, I guess.
They just seem like average people. They don't seem like the kind of people that you would make a movie about.
Right.
They don't seem exceptional in any way.
Even Franklin, who is... You feel bad for Franklin, but he's still annoying.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not... There's really not a lot for you to, like, root for them. But I root for them more than people in the second one. Because it starts out with, like... What is the deal with those two guys in the beginning of it? They're just, like, firing a gun out the window at roadsides.
Oh, yeah, the two, like, frat guys.
Calling a radio station to, like, harass them.
They're just out cruising, you know? Their favorite sports team won a game, so they're taking that as an excuse to put on their funny eyeball glasses and go out and raise some hell.
They're headed to a giant kegger to celebrate the win of their football team.
Yeah.
And
that's Texas, though.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
that's true to life.
Okay, never mind.
You can
feel pretty good.
No. You can feel totally validated. You can feel that Tobe Hooper has been annoyed in the past by people like that.
I believe he is Texas born and raised.
Yeah, so he knows the culture of Texas, and he's trying to work some stuff out in the second movie, it seems, but it's just not as good as like his vision of pure hellish terror that he had in the first movie.
Right, and
it's the I don't want to harp on. I don't actually find it that surprising that the second one is not as good as the first one, because the first one is clearly the result of a singular vision.
Yes.
Whereas the second one feels like it has the sophomore work problem, where it's like, I put everything I had into the first one, and now I need to come up with a lifetime's worth of ideas in...
Right.
Well, it did come out, like, what, 10 years? 13 years after?
A little over 10 years later.
After the first one. So, like, you'd think that he might have had some time to figure out some more stuff. But, weirdly, it still has that sophomore problem.
What I do think is interesting about the second one is the fact that the characters of the Sawyer family in the first film have such that strong dynamic where they each have a purpose and need to exist. In the sequel... I assume they had said to themselves, "Oh, we killed the hitchhiker in the first one," so they just like replace him with the exact
his
same
brother, Bill Moseley, Chop Top,
Chop Top, who was in Vietnam during the events of the first film,
and that's why he's crazy.
Yeah, he got his head nicked by. So I remember I had forgotten that the hitchhiker had died, and I was just
I forgot that until just now.
Yeah, so when I saw this character who was essentially the same exact thing, I was like, what happened? Like, did he go to Vietnam? Like, I was trying to, like, why? I literally...
When did Vietnam happen?
I literally thought it was the same character, because it's just a ripoff to kind of... They don't follow through with it in any way, but to try to maintain that family dynamic, they were like, oh, well, we need to have a new hitchhiker, so... This is Chop Top.
Yeah. His introduction in the second movie is probably the only part of the second movie that I like.
Yeah.
Him talking to the radio DJ in the radio station. His, like, creepy advancement towards her, and he keeps, like, heating up the clothes hanger.
Yeah.
And like, scratching under his wig, and you don't know what's under there yet. So it's like, you just hear metal on metal, and he keeps heating it up and scraping it, and then taking the stuff off it and eating it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty unsettling.
Like music is my life, man. That iron butterfly.
Yeah.
In a Vita da Gata. Yeah. That's a good scene.
Yeah.
If the whole movie had been like that, then I would have liked it. But instead, it's all Dennis Hopper fucking shopping for chainsaws. Though, I do kind of think that scene is pretty good, too. But most of the stuff with... How do you waste Dennis Hopper that bad? Like, Dennis Hopper's a great actor.
Ask Super Mario Brothers, the movie.
Yeah, he's good in that movie.
I think... So, you have... The weirdest thing about that movie, certainly, is... Dennis Hopper, in my opinion.
I do not know what to make of that character.
And where they kind of focus on these themes of like battle, that is his very much approach. Like, he is related to someone that got murdered by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
He's somehow related to Franklin, I think. So he would be related to Sally as well. Maybe he's an uncle. And
so he decides that he needs to battle the person who's using a chainsaw to kill these people. So he goes chainsaw shopping and buys no less than three chainsaws.
Yeah, 3 separate chainsaws.
So the thing about that I thought was interesting about the chainsaw was that I did notice when watching the first one, I maybe should have mentioned this earlier, but there's not as much gore in the first film as you would be led to believe.
Yeah, there's almost none, really.
It's really just how effective the filmography is.
It's just really well done.
And I remember thinking, when I watched it, that Leatherface's chainsaw was not very big. It was like an 8-inch, chainsaw that, yeah, sure, you're in a basement, you're working inside, you're just cutting up human bodies. You don't really need a huge chainsaw.
Yeah.
And then when Dennis Hopper goes shopping for his chainsaw and buys that, like, fucking 4-foot chainsaw, I was like, obviously they would use this in the sequel. Of course. There's no subtlety in this one.
And the way he uses it, too, is like he chops the wood.
Like, and he's like swinging it.
I'm no expert, but I don't think that's proper chainsaw form.
Certainly
It actually looks pretty dangerous.
Yeah, and ineffective, no less.
But, like, the guy who owns the chainsaw store is like, yeah.
He's like cheering him on and laughing. He's like, yeah, woo!
Hell yeah.
Like, get that thing.
Like I said, I like that scene. Maybe I like the second movie. I don't know.
From what I've gathered from other people, is that when you first watch it, you kind of hate it because you compare it to the first one. But really, it's like a spoof. And if you watch it with that mindset that it's fucking crazy and over the top, and, you know, a guy gets a chainsaw shoved in his ass, that makes it...
They always get the small businessman right in the ass.
That makes it a little bit better to watch. I did think, though, the couple things that I know I need to point out is that the humor is so over the top.
It's cartoonish.
That to the point where the father wins again for his award-winning chili, and then the judge is like eating it, and she finds a tooth in it. And he's like, "Oh, how did that get there?" And he pulls it out. And he's like,
"It's one of those hard shell peppercorns."
And it's just like, come on, really? That happened way too early in the movie to like. Okay, this is just gonna be ruined.
You're turning me around on this. Actually, I think I might like the second movie a little bit.
Yo, I might need to watch it again.
It feels like in my memory, it feels like the perfect bad sequel to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like so perfect in every way. Everything from the first movie is called back and ruined in the second one. Like what's one of the iconic shots from the first movie is fucking Leatherface doing a dance with the chainsaw. He's dancing. It's balletic. Balletic? I don't know. It's like a ballet. And then in the second movie, he does probably 5 or 6 times a fucking stupid shuffle dance with it, like with the chainsaw over his head, and he's just going... Does a little soft shoe with the chainsaw.
And I really don't... It's kind of hard to even follow the second one, because it's just... I was excited to watch it, honestly, because I had heard that it follows the family more. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes that's not better. Sometimes, as was pointed out in that video essay we just watched, sometimes what you don't see is what makes it scary. And, you know, getting a little too much kind of just ruins the effect that it had. Yeah. And before we were recording, we were like, maybe we just shouldn't talk about the second one, because I really don't have much to say about it.
Yeah, me either, honestly.
It's not very good.
It's all right.
It's a horrible sequel.
It's an okay movie. It's not good like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is good. It's not. By no means is it a masterpiece. By no means do I recommend that anybody watch it. Am I sad that I watched it? Not really.
I would be sad if I bought it.
Oh God, if I owned that movie, yeah, I don't know what I would want to do with it. Probably destroy it with an axe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But it has some really good parts. Yeah. That chainsaw shopping scene almost makes it the whole movie worth
it. It's so surreal.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was kind of a bummer about it was that the final chase is just so comical, and there's no tension. It's just like awkward.
The whole movie is kind of without tension.
It just becomes like a self-referential joke. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, I guess is a spoof. But
well, I guess you could think of in the first movie. Maybe the second movie. Maybe the purpose of the second movie is to make it so that when you go back and watch the first one, the funny parts of the first one are accentuated. Yeah. So the second movie on its own is not particularly funny, not particularly good. Like it has its moments, but the way it recontextualizes how you can watch the first one, I think, is kind of interesting. With that said, I think we had enough distance from the original context of the first one. I think that we were able to see the funny parts of the first one as they were without needing the help of the second one. I think that if I try to imagine what it must have been like to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the 70s or 80s, like when it first came out, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Yeah. Like, you've never seen a movie like that before. It must have been just terrifying. And then to be able to have this second movie that really kind of plays the first movie's hand, it's like, no, actually the first movie was sort of fucking funny. And then to be able to go back and watch the first movie and say, like, wow, actually he does poke her a lot of times with that stick, and it does hold on all those pieces of the creepy bone sculpture room for a long time, and she does jump out 2 separate windows. The chase is insane in the first movie.
Too, that in the first movie, like, the front door to the house is right next to those stairs.
Yeah.
After she has been upstairs and had to jump out a window because there was nowhere else to go, she does it again.
She runs back upstairs.
Instead of just running for the door, she turns around to run up the stairs and out another window. Yeah, I
guess that kind of justifies the second movie's existence for me.
I think that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, as I think you pointed out, I think is more of a proto slasher than I think it is more. It's hard to say this because I do think it's a great film, but I almost think it is more influential as like what it did for movies after it than of itself. And in that regard, the second one, I can see why I guess they would do that, because how do you recreate that? Can you imagine anyone wanted to, like, Tobe Hooper probably didn't love filming the first one with all those limitations, and
I bet he had a good time. I bet he looks back on it fondly, because like you can see in the cinematography the kinds of creative decisions that were being made, and in the acting the kinds of creative decisions that were being made. And I bet everybody's like proud of the work that they did on that movie, and they should be. It's an excellent movie.
Fantastic.
But what point were you getting at before I interrupted you? I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Are we done?
You know what's weird is we're only at like an hour and 10 minutes. It's actually pretty short.
This is what a weekly podcast is going to be like. Yeah. You know, we're gonna get right into it. We're gonna talk about what we're excited about. Maybe what if the thing that our show is we tell people if they should or should not watch these things. We are the arbiters of taste. Do you think that people should watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
I don't know if that works because we are so spoiler heavy. I feel like people have probably already watched it, and then so I would recommend. We always tell people what we're going to be doing next, so I feel like if they've already done it, and then we're like, yeah, you probably shouldn't watch it. I already did, Kurt. Yeah, that's true.
Or is this worth recommending?
The first one...
Is this a valuable addition to culture?
The first one, definitely.
I think the first one is essential. I think the first one is a movie that I am ashamed to not have seen for as long as I did not see it.
I would call the first one essential horror viewing. Mm-hmm. And the second one, I almost have an appreciation for it. It's not what I wanted it to be, and it wasn't even particularly good.
Yeah.
But it has enough good parts.
Yeah.
That it kind of feels like, yeah, fine.
It justifies itself.
And I think an important part of it, too, is that I'm not a super huge horror guy. And I don't really think you are either. We're into horror, but it's one of the many things that we're into.
Though also we should contextualize that we're kind of probably internally comparing ourselves to Mike when we say that. So like we are more horror guys than the average person.
Yeah,
I think
that's fair. But I don't have a love of gross out grind horror.
I would say I have a love of it.
And
maybe I am a horror guy.
So I think that I don't need to watch films like. I've seen Cannibal Holocaust, but it was not something I needed to see. Mm-hmm. And I think Texas Chainsaw 2 is kind of one of those. It's a horror person's film where
as I alluded to earlier, the gore effects are really good.
Yeah.
Like when the frat kid gets his head chopped in half and like the blood is spurting out, I really liked that. When LG gets skinned and then it turns out he's still alive and he's like walking around, I loved that.
How can I say that I think Tom Savini is a great person and I respect him immensely and what he's given to the horror genre, but I don't love his effects?
You don't love his effects?
I don't.
What do you not like about him?
Every time...
About them, rather, because you like him, but not them.
Yeah. And I mean, every time I've seen Tom Savini's effects, maybe there are a couple examples that aren't the case. Like I would probably say Dawn of the Dead is one I can get on board with. Every time, and I feel like it's pushed to like a comical level, And I think that is, I'm thinking of examples like Day of the Dead, where you see a man, or is it Return of the Living Dead? One of those movies, you see a man get ripped in half, and zombies are like eating his guts.
I think that's Day of the Dead.
As it happens.
Yeah, the one in the military base.
Yeah, someone gets pulled through a window.
I believe that is Day of the Dead, and there's a very specific reference to that shot in Shaun of the Dead as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And what else? There are the I think from Dusk Till Dawn with the cock revolver, and he just has all of his effects go there. Yeah. That is basically what I think, and I respect him, but I just think that a lot of times it's further than I need it to go. And I think it gives any movie that he does this over-the-top cheesy effect when I want... I think I'm still at a point in horror where I'm watching this movie because it was influential. I'm looking at it like a history class, and I'm not into the super grindy, over-the-top, like, gross-out horror.
Were you when you were a kid?
I never really. I've seen a lot of them because I have friends that are. And I grew up, I was in high school when movies like Saw and Hostel came out, when in Human Centipede, which I've actually never seen.
It's not great.
When I refused to watch it.
It's kind of fucking boring,
honestly. I literally that was the point where I was like, I never need to see that. You've won. You
know who really likes Human Centipede?
Who?
Friend of the show, Will Lane. God. Shout out to Will
Damn
Lane.
It, Will Lane. Yeah. I kind of grew up in an environment where torture porn became a thing, and it was just never really for me. I watched a lot of Asian horror when I was in high school, and it was just I just never needed that.
See, I kind of lost the plot when it came to the torture porn movement in the mid 2000s, but when I was a kid, I loved the like gory effects, and I can track it all the way back to its origin for me, this also involves friend of the show Casey, my sister, who was on the It episode. Is that you remember how the Michael Jackson video for Thriller, you could get a VHS tape, and it was like a half-hour long VHS that played the video first and then a making of documentary of the video, and it showed you how they did all the effects. It showed you how they did the makeup on the zombies. It showed you how they did the werewolf transformation, all that shit. And I thought that was rad. And my sister and I watched that video over and over and over again, like you do when you're a kid. And I think ever since then, it kind of gave me just enough distance from the reality of the effects that I was able to appreciate them as like, wow, this is happening in the movie, but I was also able to appreciate it as like, wow, I wonder how the fuck they did that.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me.
There have always been parts in movies where, a few shout out moments, like in Saw when the dude cuts his foot off with a hacksaw.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And the whole movie builds up to that. It's Chekhov's Saw. And it's like it's in the title.
In Hostel, when the person's, both points actually, 2 parts, when the person's heels are slit and they stand up and they kind of peel a little bit.
Yeah.
I always check out about, no, that is not what I needed. Like, that always, I guess I just don't have that. I'm not into horror and gore and effects enough to be...
I think those are a distinct thing, though, because in both of those cases, those are meant to create a sense of empathy within you. Like a sense that you're supposed to feel a little bit of that pain. You're supposed to feel it in your brain. You're supposed to feel a small version of it. Where I don't think most of Tom Savini's effects had that as their goal. They were supposed to be visually impressive, and they were supposed to photograph well. But a moment where someone gets their Achilles tendon cut, you're supposed to think like, holy shit. Yeah. Like, what would that feel like if that happened to me?
Not good, I would think.
Probably not great. Not so hot.
So I guess that's kind of a long way to talk about that, but I really like Tom Savini. I like when he's in movies. I've watched, documentaries that he's featured in, and I think he's a great guy, and I really respect him. But every time I don't have a taste for that, like, over the top, like, impressive looking, but just like so gory effects. Mm-hmm. But I mean, horror would not be the same without him. So what can I say?
That's true. Though I think horror has kind of moved past that point.
Yeah. Well, practical effects are so few and far between now. I think that there's not much. It's such a shame that practical effects came and went so fast.
I mean, when we get to our, would you consider? I guess I don't know. Would you consider the effects in The Thing to be practical?
I believe they are. A lot of them are practical,
but a lot of them are stop motion. So there is a physical object, but it's being puppeted. Well, I guess that
stop motion. I think stop motion is still considered a practical effect.
And also, were they? They weren't actually stop motion, were they? I'm talking out my ass. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. They were puppets. A lot of them.
Okay, I don't.
There are moments that are stop motion, like claymation, and then there are moments that are puppets. Anyway, we'll get to it in the Thing episode.
Thank God.
Yeah.
My favorite movie.
Yeah, but that's like one of the biggest practical effects movies ever, I think.
Yeah. What a great movie.
What an awesome movie.
So I think that is I think that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is essential viewing, and I would probably say that, the second one, if you're a fan of horror, it's essential. You have to put in your time to watch the bad ones with the good ones.
You got to do it.
You can't be a horror fan and not tread through those horrible franchises. Well,
maybe this can be how we finish off episodes now. If we're changing the format of the show, let's start categorizing things. All right, I love categories. I think that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 is essential. Mm-hmm. I think that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is a curiosity.
Okay, that's fire. That's fair.
That is fire too.
Yeah, I was gonna start to say fine and fair at the same time.
Yeah.
So, do we want to do a political block? We have 10 minutes.
I got nothing to say.
There was a shooting this week.
Oh God, yeah. That's a follow that with a chuckle. What the fuck are you doing? We shouldn't let you read the news. This is why we don't do a political block. The tragedy in Las Vegas.
We don't really have to get political. We can.
We don't really know. Cut this all out.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to. That requires additional editing.
Oh man, has there been anything going on in politics? Not really. I don't know. I'm still continuing my journey into the dark heart of chaos that is the millennial generation.
And I appreciate that you're still riding this neo-Nazi train because America isn't. We've moved on to hurricanes and gun violence.
Dude, they're going to have another protest again. Probably.
We need to focus.
Maybe later this year or early next year. I bet they will have another protest that's going to be big. And you know what's going to be different? Is they're not going to have. There's an emerging consensus within the alt-right right now that they're not going to call themselves the alt-right anymore. They're going to shed that name and move on to another one. I don't know what the next one's going to be. But B, there's an emerging consensus that the what they refer to as Nazi LARPers are really hurting them. They're really hurting their image. They're hurting their optics in the media. There are people who say things like the only reason we got any bad coverage about Charlottesville was because there were people there with Nazi regalia on. So they are going to drop the swastikas. Doesn't mean they're not still Nazis. They're not technically Nazis. They're fascists. But it doesn't mean they don't still hew very close to the Nazi platform of ethnic segregation and ethnic cleansing. But they're not going to show it anymore. So what's going to be vital is for people to look out for that next alt-right protest and to say, hey, just because they don't literally have swastikas painted onto the shields doesn't mean they're not a bad group.
I think a subreddit that's become increasingly popular in the past few weeks has been Behold the Master Race, which is a comedic subreddit of just posting pictures of very ugly or out of shape or horrific looking neo-Nazis. Mm-hmm. So I would almost think that it would make sense to drop that symbol because they can't hold it up very well.
It's way too recognizable. And frankly, they recognize that it's both strategically necessary and strategically advantageous to drop it. because the term Nazi is poisoned.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
I think that's a great point.
But in addition, we as a counter movement to their movement have focused way too much on saying these people are bad because they're calling themselves Nazis. They're not bad because they're calling themselves Nazis. They're bad for a host of other reasons.
Many reasons.
For many reasons. If they drop the Nazi thing, it's going to, if we have focused too hard on the Nazi thing, it's going to be hard for us to muster any counter arguments against them.
I really hate how effective it actually was. I mean, I can't imagine it was done entirely on purpose, but it makes so much sense to rally behind the swastika because it's that instant symbol of like
that sentence that you just said is pretty crazy.
What I don't know what I said.
It makes so much sense to rally behind the swastika
because it's that symbol. It's recognizable as if you have these thoughts, or even if you don't, we're brave enough to fly this flag. Come be a part of us, and then once you have your group assembled, say there are way too many people that see that symbol and think bad. We're never going to be able to get more people if we have this symbol. So let's get a new name and a new symbol. We're going to see a new symbol soon.
Probably. It might be the Kekistani flag. I don't know. The thing that you really have to look out for is what's called dog whistling. Are you familiar with this term?
I've heard the phrase.
So dog whistling is when a person says something that is not explicitly racist, but it clearly communicates to someone who is already racist that this group is racist. And I think that the swastika has been kind of a weird dog whistle for them for a long time. It gets them a lot of attention. And someone who's like, hey, I don't really hate the swastika that much. I'm kind of down with the Nazis, but not like super down with the Nazis, but kind of like maybe I didn't have a particularly good history teacher, so I don't know exactly why everybody hates these Nazi guys so much. And now someone's telling me that Germany made so much economic progress under the Nazis, and they're telling me that the Holocaust didn't really happen, that's all Allied propaganda. And hey, you know that phrase, history is written by the winners. Yep. You know, that phrase has always held true forever, so anything that is in history must be false and, like, influenced by the perspective of the winners. Of course the Allies are going to make it seem like the Nazis were the ultimate evil. So now, in my head, as this quote-unquote centrist, which is really just like a slang term for an uninformed individual, like, now in the mind of this fucking centrist, they're like, hey, maybe I'm kind of down with these Nazis. Maybe I'm super down with these Nazis. I don't know. It's terrifying, man. It's terrifying. We got to keep an eye on this shit. How many political minutes has this been?
We got a couple minutes, but that's okay because we got to do our plugs and stuff. So.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this platform.
I was gonna say, I don't know if I should have given you the platform.
Thank you for giving me this outlet.
I mean, it was yours to take, but maybe I didn't need to invite you to it.
Yeah, I would have never talked about this shit if it wasn't for you inviting me to have a political minute.
So yeah, I guess we'll wrap this up.
Yeah,
we're at about an hour and a half. So this has been the first episode of the Texorcist month. Mm-hmm. We'll be coming back next week with Exorcism 1 and 2. Hopefully we're not cramming too much viewing time.
I don't think we are.
We'll be all right. Into this now. We'll be discussing the first two films in the Exorcist franchise, which feels weird to say because it doesn't really feel like a franchise, but I guess it is. There are like 4 or 5 movies in it. So.
I think it is technically correct that it is a franchise, but it doesn't feel correct. Like, it's not figuratively correct.
So thanks for listening. You can subscribe to Black Gold Podcast on iTunes and Stitcher to listen to Ben and Curt Till It Hurts and my show Black Gold Podcast. You can listen to Ben and Curt Till It Hurts on YouTube as well now, which is pretty radical.
Yeah,
because I actually listen to like a lot of my content on YouTube. So
YouTube's a great content zone.
I'm glad we have a presence there now. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KurtCake5K. Ben has Facebook.
I have a Twitter account too, but I'm keeping it secret.
Oh, cool. It's just at Ben V.
It literally was at Ben V90 until I changed it. I have a new one now. Keeping it secret. No big deal.
I think you can actually at somebody's old screen name and it will link to the new page.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, go ahead and at me.
Sorry, Ben.
At Ben V90.
I don't know if that works or not.
You just made that up.
No, I didn't, but I think in the past I used somebody's old name and it changed it to the new one. And I was like, what? And then I looked and I was like, oh, I guess they changed their name.
Huh.
I don't know, though. That was in like 2010.
What if someone takes your old username?
I don't know if you can.
Because you can change... Oh, yeah, I guess that's true.
I don't know if they let you take an old one that's been used before. I don't know. I don't know much about the Twitter. I don't use Twitter very often.
Twitter's a mystery to me.
Instagram, for me, is where it's at.
Yeah.
I don't like the limitations.
Of Twitter?
I could never say anything in 140 words. Characters, no less.
Holy
not even
shit,
words.
Characters. 140 words is actually quite a significant.
Yeah,
chunk
I
of
can
change.
say a lot in a
140 words is like a paragraph. Good, solid size paragraph, too.
It's a good paragraph.
Anyway, we got to get out of this fucking hole.
So next week will be The Exorcist 1 and 2. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.